welcome to another sparkling edition of Plank of the Week. We're getting very, very close now to the end of the year, so Plank of the Year, the special, is coming very soon. And I'm delighted to say that we've now got, as well as a little plaque on the plank, which says Plank of the Week, which was sent in by a fan up in Rotherham last week, so that's very nice. I'm delighted also to say that we've got two stalwarts with us. Dawn Neesom, the most popular woman ever for Plank of the Week. You've been here now more times than anybody else. Mark Dolan, not far behind in the stakes. So we're working on this sort of ensemble edition that we're going to do for the top 20 planks of the year. So keep yourselves at least one or two dates free towards Christmas, when of course we'll be out of the lockdown. Won't we?
Good luck with that.
Speaking of which, Dawn, why don't we start off with you? Who's going to be your first plank of the week?
I am going to go for the most obvious plank of this entire pandemic, probably.
Yeah.
Boris Johnson.
Yep.
I'm
it's
sorry.
hard to argue.
This week in particular, he has excelled himself. You know, just grow a pair.
Yeah.
Seriously, please.
Right.
Just all we want in this country now is a strong leader.
A leader. Well, any kind of leader.
A leader, any sort of leader will do. Making decisions and actually giving us confidence on what have we got. We have got a pile of piffle, to use his words. A jellyfish who I just want to punch him. You know, the irony is that, you know, Mrs. Boris, Carrie Symonds.
Sorry, you'll have to be specific there, obviously.
Yeah, obviously there's a
them.
long list, to be fair. But she's called Princess Nut Nuts.
So apparently so.
The irony is that's the very thing her fiancé needs to grow a pair of.
Maybe that was how the name came up in the first place. Was it not? Was there not a correction that I saw that it was Nut Nut?
It is Nut Nut, yes.
Rather than Nut Nuts.
Yes,
right.
Yes. It's a single nut, which doesn't surprise me, given who she's engaged to.
I wonder whether the jellyfish of the world should launch a collective legal action against this awful slander on their name.
Yeah.
Jellyfish are extremely efficient creatures which carry with them a nasty sting.
Yes.
Boris has got no sting whatsoever.
Sting removed.
No. He's
like a pet jellyfish.
Well, he's not even that. He's a bowl of jelly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think actually, you know, in the course of this week's planks, I'm sure that Dominic Cummings' name will come up.
It will.
Lee Kane and Carrie Symonds. Okay. In the end,
is it Symonds or Simons? I keep hearing people calling it Simons. I call it Symonds. It looks like Symonds to me.
I call it
because
Symonds,
her dad was famously Matthew Symonds, wasn't he? Who was one of the gang of 4 or 3 that started the Independent.
Well, given the fact that she's head of policy at Number 10, I think we ought to know the pronunciation of her name. Don't you
Yes,
think?
exactly.
Well,
yes.
There's a lot of fake news out there, you see. She may be putting it out that it's a different pronunciation from what it's meant to be.
Well,
but, I mean, listen, if it's Carrie Symonds running the country, I wouldn't mind that. She may do a better job than Boris. It's always possible.
Dylan the dog would do a better job than Boris.
Yeah.
But my point is that actually it's a distraction to criticise or look back at the legacy of Dominic Cummings. It's actually a distraction to criticise Matt Hancock or indeed, you know, his young fiancée, because in the end, all of these people and their undue influence on the Prime Minister are a reflection of Boris's weak personality. Unfortunately, the people that voted for Boris in December 2019 were missold what Boris Johnson, who Boris Johnson was. The idea is that he was this swashbuckling,
You had to be very careful how you said that.
Careful, confident figure, get Brexit done, and that this was a flavour of his dynamic leadership.
Yeah.
We've had no dynamic leadership, and it's a big problem for the country. So I'm going to let all the people around him off the hook. Dominic Cummings' power over Boris Johnson was a reflection of the problem with Boris himself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Boris wants to be Churchillian. Instead, he's just reptilian.
I don't know why he keeps saying that. It's very true, that reptile, I like that. But this is the other thing, right? You know, why does he now have to replace Dominic Cummings, which is clearly what's happened, with somebody else who tells him what to do?
Correct.
Because that seems to be where the fight is. It's not about, you know, winning Boris over. It's about pinning him down on the ground and putting your foot on his neck and going, now you're going to do this.
What sort of man puts up with all this backbiting and gossiping and nastiness going on around him?
I know.
And also, you know, it's one thing to be have no backbone like Theresa May, who was so reliant on Nick Timothy and Fiona Hill, who were a toxic partnership that co-wrote the worst manifesto since 1983.
Yeah. And also called for an election where they didn't need to.
A disaster.
What was that about?
Theresa May, a decent, honourable and hard-working woman, but again, no ideology, no centre of gravity politically, and no strength of character. Well, the ultimate issue...
Well, although Boris currently is making her look like she has all of those things.
I'm actually starting to think that running through a cornfield or a hayfield or whatever it was, being specific, is actually a really good thing to do.
Absolutely, and let's not forget that she emerged a couple of weeks ago as a heroic figure in Parliament, as a lockdown sceptic voice. Yes. You know. So it's a big, big problem. I think that Boris is in the last chance saloon. I think among his sort of core, which is a shrinking group. I mean, I, for example, would have feared coming on this show and criticise Boris Johnson maybe 2-3 months ago. Such was the veracity of his fandom. Right. Now, the ultimate Boris loyalists are few and far between. And he's got to win hearts and minds.
Yeah, he does.
Not going to.
But of course, the other thing to think about with him is that he has also been written off quite a lot in the past. And he does have a sort of survivability factor where he does somehow emerge out of all of this stuff where, you know, whatever happens in his personal life, he seems to brush it by. You might remember, do you remember that famous video of him cycling home after he'd clearly been somewhere he shouldn't have been, and the press are waiting there for him, and he's like dressed as if he's just got out of bed, because he probably has, and he just sort of walks up the steps, gives them a wave, and then he goes. And, you know, not much more was said about it. So I think you have to be careful about writing him off, only because I think he's surrounded also by spineless jellyfish types.
Yeah,
I mean, there's not very many strong characters, it seems to me, inside of cabinet. Because if there were, surely they would have all said, enough is enough. We can't keep locking the place down. Do something different.
Well, I think, though, Boris's core fan base are entrepreneurial, aspirational people across all classes, including the Red Wall constituencies, people who didn't want to be told, oh, poor you need to be looked after by a Labour government. They rejected Corbyn's communism. But what they did want is to start a business, or at least to make something of their lives. And the problem you've got is that Boris's legacy at the moment, with crashing the economy into a brick wall, will be destroyed businesses, spiralling unemployment, which is the opposite of what people bought into for Project Boris.
Yes, and also he's now self-isolated for 14 days. Right. Not only did we know that there was nothing wrong with him, we suspected there was nothing wrong with him, he's now had a negative test. And he's still going to self-isolate.
He's still got to self-isolate.
Well, he says he's got to. He's the Prime Minister. He doesn't have to.
Well, I mean, he always goes missing when he's needed, though.
That's the problem.
The timing of this is spectacular, isn't it? Brexit looming, the mess of the childish atmosphere that's going on in Number 10. And what does he do?
But that's the other thing.
Sofa.
You know, we've all got jobs which demand that you spend a lot of time and give it a lot of attention, right? Well, we certainly did have them, if you don't call the proper jobs that we've got now. But, you know, when you were in newspapers, you know, you wouldn't have rung up on the day that, you know, I don't know, Gianni Versace was shot dead and go, oh, I'm not coming in today. Because you want to be there.
Okay, exactly.
Why would you want somebody running the country who doesn't want to run the country?
Exactly. This is, I can't understand that.
It's counterintuitive, isn't it?
Because all his life he's wanted to be Prime Minister, and now he is, and he's not doing the job.
Ultimately, he's shamed by the image of his hero, Winston Churchill, because what a leader has to do, especially in wartime, and frankly, we are in a war situation, because this country is facing a fight for its survival. There is the horrible COVID death toll, and that's appallingly tragic, but there's also the historic damage that's being done to the economy. And therefore, he is a wartime leader, and he is at the moment fearful of the enemy, which is COVID-19. And
he's fearful
got to,
of his missus.
Well, there's one slight problem, which is that we elect prime ministers to make tough decisions on our behalf, and he's not. He is escaping all tough decisions. And in the end, there's more economic damage, more loss of life as a result of the COVID consensus, you know. And it's got to change, or it will destroy his legacy. I think there's one problem, you know. He's in the grip of fear. Boris Johnson is skint. You know, Boris Johnson is on his uppers. He's had multiple expensive divorces. He's got kids in private school. And ultimately, I think he's fearful of life after Number 10. And that's why he's so risk averse. He's so terrified of that COVID death toll, which he thinks he'll be judged on, which is why the pandemic has now become a political project.
No, totally.
I think it speaks for having...
Well, I must admit, if I was the newspaper editor now, I wouldn't offer him £250,000 to write a column, which is what he was getting before.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. Funnily enough...
funnily enough, he's busted that particular flush, isn't he?
Yeah. And
I genuinely think that Boris Johnson is in a mood of self-preservation now. He's thinking about life after Number 10, which, by the way, could be sooner than we all expect. And I think there's an argument for possibly independently wealthy politicians. Someone like Rishi Sunak is a multi-millionaire. He actually has the financial leverage to go into Number 10, not be subject to corruption, but also perhaps brave enough to make tough decisions in the national interest. So Boris, you're in the last chance saloon. If you can't man up and get this done, someone else will come in and do it for you.
Well, Harsh words for the Prime Minister, but let's have your first nomination then.
I'm going to give you Uncle Sam.
Yes.
Well, I'm not inclined to take sides in the US presidential debate. Of course, it looks like it's gone Joe Biden's way now.
I'm afraid you have to do that because nobody is allowed to be involved in a debate unless you are vehemently for one and against the other.
Well, I know, and I'm a little agnostic because I think it is a matter for the American people who they choose to be their head of state and head of government. Ultimately, though, my thoughts are twofold. I'm done with being told America is the greatest country in the world.
Yeah.
First of all, the idea that the best choice the American people could be offered was two septuagenarians, both with significant character flaws in their own right.
Yeah.
Also, America is currently $27 trillion in debt. A lot of that debt owned by the Chinese.
Yeah.
So, good luck with standing up to China, folks. It is the most obese nation in the Western world, the sickest. 65% of Americans are overweight or obese. Also, America is now in a civil war. The police have been sort of facing requests to be defunded and all the rest of it, and the electoral system is not fit for purpose. So America isn't even the greatest democracy. We still don't have a definitive answer as to who the president
It's hopeless,
is.
isn't it?
How bad can you be at counting?
It's hopeless.
There are court cases going on across 5 different states. Votes are still being counted.
Right.
And this is the country that gave the world Coca-Cola, Levi's jeans and the iPhone. It's like, can't they do better?
You would
really
have thought so,
saddens
wouldn't
me.
you? Do you know, I found that happening quite a long time ago because I moved to New York when I was 23. It was 1983, and Britain was in a hell of a state. Thatcher had come in, but we were still recovering from the 70s.
Sick man of Europe.
Sick man of Europe. Nothing worked. You couldn't get somebody to put a phone in for you, never mind, get yourself a piece of computer equipment. And I moved to America, and America was this great shining beacon on the hill, as Ronald Reagan used to call it. And it was Reagan's era. And America was amazing to me. It was New York City, 24/7. Everything was open. You get whatever you wanted, whenever you wanted it. All the bars were great. Everyone was terrific. You didn't get, would you want? No, you can't have a sandwich. It's 2:30, mate, and all that.
Yeah.
And it was this fantastic country that had incredible sort of, planes that flew everywhere. You didn't just get on a bus to go somewhere. You got on a plane to go somewhere. Great hotels. I mean, it was fantastic. And then later, I moved back to Britain in the 90s, and I started visiting America because my sister lives there and my kids lived there as well at the time. And it's just getting worse and worse and worse over the course of the sort of 90s, all the way through into the turn of the century. And the trains suddenly started crashing, which they never did. Planes were kind of not as good as they used to be, and it all started to sort of turn.
And the roads are crumbling.
The infrastructure has never had any money spent on it for decades.
There.
And the homelessness now, I was in LA, 18 months ago. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, likewise.
I mean, it was pretty bad
too.
in New York in the 80s, but, you kind of thought that's because it's New York.
Yeah.
Now it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And there's a terrible kind of sense of foreboding.
Well, there's a homeless city in what is the richest state in America, which is California,
Yeah.
around Venice Beach.
Yeah.
There are tens of thousands of people.
Yeah.
It's a small
Well,
city.
I'm told now Manhattan is a kind of no-go zone. I mean, my sister still has a flat there, but she's rented it out now because she doesn't have to go to work until probably back end of March in an office building. But they've rented out all of the sort of empty hotels to the city, full of homeless people. People are getting accosted in the street, because a lot of the people who are homeless in America are, not very well. They're mentally unstable, or they're drunks or they're drug addicts. And apparently New York City now is like a proper zombie apocalypse, because all the people who would normally be living there and walking around have just left and left this kind of husk behind. It's
And the
terrible.
truth is that we need America to prosper. This is not an anti-American rant.
No.
I adore America. All of my musical and comedy heroes are American culture, American industry. There's my iPhone. It's given so much to the world. But it's just in a state of
China,
crisis.
by the way.
Well,
I was just going to say that.
Ironically, but there is so much talent in America, and they've got to get this right. And the first place to start is the electoral system. In the end, a country is not fit for purpose if it cannot defend its borders, if it cannot collect taxes from the public, and if it cannot run elections, free and fair elections.
Yeah.
This is sounding very familiar.
Why different states have a different policy on postal ballots is mystifying.
I know.
And
mind you, but the
ultimately,
federal system is quite weird as well, because you can have the death penalty in Mississippi, but you cannot have the death penalty in New York. It's gone backwards and forwards, So
Right.
where you commit your crime could lead to your death.
Well, exactly.
Just depending on a 10-mile difference.
If anybody is a fan of the idea of the United States of Europe, have a look at the United States of America, because we've seen that democratically it's not coherent. No. You mentioned human rights are different in different states. But also COVID strategy was different from state to state. Now, hello, America's one country, it's one landmass, so it's a bit ridiculous for one state to lock down and the other to stay open.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that I can say that's good about all of this is that I did predict that this would happen. I alone was the predictor that Donald Trump would claim victory before he'd actually won, and would then argue about it for about the next 2 months, which is exactly how it's playing out.
Well, I think
it's not pretty, is it?
No, it isn't. Ultimately, I'm sure that there might be some arguments about the veracity, the accuracy of that result, but I feel in relation to Donald that the fat lady hasn't just sung; she's finished a 3-hour concert at Carnegie Hall. The margins are just too enormous now.
I think it's going to be difficult, isn't it?
It is. If it was genuinely close, I think he'd have some moral authority here. But Joe Biden has won the popular vote by in excess of 5 million.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter, though, with respect.
Well, it doesn't. But you can't claim some kind of leftist agenda in relation to whoever gets the White House, given the fact that the most recent close-to-call results in U.S. elections have favoured the Republicans, whether it was George W. Bush versus Al Gore,
the system,
and, of course, most recently...
But that's the system, because in the end... the places where you end up winning, which are the pivotal states, are the ones which are the closest. So that's by the nature of the beast. It doesn't matter really that 5 million extra people voted for Biden. It makes no difference at all.
Well, no, it doesn't.
He only needs the 5,000 extra people that voted for him. If it's in Florida by 5,000, that's good enough.
Well, the big question now for Trump's supporters is what is the best thing for him to do? Should he now just do a complete U-turn and say, Mr. Biden, you've won, and we're going to support you and get you, as normally presidents do.
I don't think he's ever going to say we're going to support you.
He's not, because he's such a narcissist. He's not going to say that.
No, he's never going to say that.
Well, then he should be mindful of how does he get back into the White House in 4 years' time.
I don't think he should bother. I think he should go off and start his new media empire, right, and go from there, because he'd be far more effective of an enemy of Joe Biden's by running a right-wing TV station, which is watched by 100 million people.
True.
And that would be the final sort of ignominy for Biden, because then he could have reporters chasing him all of his life 24/7 until they find something big enough to get him out of office.
I am eternally grateful to America for one thing, though. They've taken Harry and Meghan off our hands.
That's true. Yes. That is very true. Very nicely done, slipping them in there, because I don't believe they're going to make the list this week. Mind you, I could carry. There's always one that carries over from last week, so it could be them. My first one this week is going to be Extinction Rebellion, even though it sort of dates back a little bit to Remembrance Day last week. Because, of course, you'll remember that terrible scene where these two bozos, one claiming to be a veteran, I'm not really sure whether he is or not, it was never really properly decided, but dressed certainly as a veteran, wearing a mask, another one dressed as a nurse, somehow managed to get out of the fence around the cenotaph out of the way, somehow managed to walk with a wreath, which has got, action now for climate change, walk on top, and people have said, they tried to step over the wreath. No, they walked on top of the wreath of the honoured dead, right, which is so disgusting, went right up to the cenotaph, and they didn't have to do that. If they really wanted to, they could have just lain it on the floor. But no, they had to go and stick it right on the cenotaph, walk back over the honoured dead wreaths, and then erect some kind of, ridiculous slogan, which was pinned there for about half an hour, apparently, before the police took it down. I just think these people have got to learn that is not protesting. It's got nothing to do with the war. It's got nothing to do with bloody climate change. That is a day for remembering people that died for their country.
That was shocking. I found that really upsetting, genuinely upsetting. For all the veterans that weren't allowed to go to the cenotaph and weren't allowed to march. And these are people that will probably never see another Remembrance Day. And they were stopped by the ridiculous rules we have in this country at the moment. And yet those two bozos could do that.
I spoke to a veteran last week, 96 years of age, I think he was, who had been in the SAS during the Second World War, right?
Amazing.
An incredible guy.
Courage.
And started telling me this story of how he was finally had to be sent back to Britain because he got blown up, his Jeep got blown up, and he was laughing about it. He said, you should have seen the Jeep, there was nothing left of it.
Yeah.
And I said, what happened to you? He said, I was blown over a hedge. But he said, I can't go to Westminster because it's too dangerous.
Yeah,
and you're going, what?
Absolutely insane.
Yeah. And that would probably be one of his last trips, you would imagine.
Yeah.
But then they also did something else the other day where they went and did another one of these kind of dirty protests where they poured black ink or something outside one of the government buildings. And the police seem to just let them do it.
But this is what
I don't understand.
This is what I don't understand. Why are we criminalising people for doing completely ordinary things?
Yeah.
Like literally chatting to the wrong person at the
Going
wrong
to a
time,
shop without
going
a
to a
mask
shop,
on.
trying to go to the gym when obesity is one of the biggest killers in this country.
Yeah.
And yet we're allowing these people to behave like this.
I don't get it.
It doesn't make any sense.
I really don't get it.
And it's a tragedy for anybody that cares about the environment, which I would argue is almost everybody.
We all do. I mean, everybody does, surely.
Nobody is saying let's heat the planet up and let's pollute. Ultimately, if you're going to have an agenda which is a green agenda which saves the planet, it has to work within the market economy. It has to be a good business model, which is actually great news in this country because a lot of our renewable energies are fantastically efficient and generate a lot of income and a lot of employment. So it's, no one is saying that this is green versus not green. Ironically, it will backfire horribly for XR because people who are, I guess, environmentally minded will look at that footage
and just be offended.
Yeah, and then they'll go the other way
Absolutely.
and go, sod you.
That's not right.
Sod you, I'm buying a diesel.
Well, also, do you remember what
losing
happened
support.
in Canning Town when they all pulled the Extinction Rebellion
decent,
people? Because
ordinary
decent,
people.
ordinary people trying to get to work
Yeah.
were like, you're stopping me getting to
Yeah.
work, 7, 8 o'clock in the
Yeah, it
morning or
was,
something.
yeah. Absolutely,
And
yeah.
they were decent, hard-working people.
Yeah.
And, who all have probably children to look after and
Yeah.
who don't want to poison the earth or anything.
Right.
But, these bozos are all middle
Yeah.
class, white kids who just think this is all great for a laugh,
Yeah,
Shocking.
the other big thing is that, Britain is one of the greenest countries in the world. And so if
Well,
you're going...
we produce 2%, I think, of the world's
Yeah,
carbon.
and it's projected to drop down to 1%. And I would say if you want to have these violent protests, then why don't you go to India or Brazil
Well,
or
yeah, good luck
China
with that.
Yeah.
or even perhaps the United States?
Yeah, glue yourself to a train in China. They'll just let it go anyway.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
Or even go to the embassies in this country of those, in this country of those countries, and do something there. See how far you get.
I know.
But that cenotaph thing, really, I mean, that was the most poignant, emotional cenotaph ceremony I can remember
Yeah,
for a long
it
time.
really
And I
was.
really got upset. I really felt for the people that couldn't be there. And then these idiots were allowed to do
I
that,
know.
and the police just stood and watched them.
I know.
By the way, I
Outrageous.
do think one solution is for there to be a better political movement that supports the green agenda.
What, you mean
Because
like the Green Party?
Well, the problem is, they have one MP in Parliament,
Yeah.
but they've got no support across the country. And I think that actually, the environmentalists need to raise their game and understand we live in a democracy and work through
But the
democratic
trouble is you
procedures.
say that, Mark, and we've been talking about Boris Johnson. I mean, the Green
Carrie
Tories
Simmons.
that have become what they are. We don't need the Green Party anymore. I mean, Caroline Lucas might as well pack her bag and go back to Brighton and set herself back up at a teepee near the beach or wherever it was she came from. Because at the end of the day, the Tories are now more green than the Green
Well,
Party.
Carrie Simmons is doing a regular job of running that
Yeah,
particular.
I mean, on
Well,
the day that
Maybe.
Cummings and all of that stuff was happening and he was walking out, Boris tweeted one thing, and it was about some bloody ocean project that they got involved
I
in,
saw that,
saving the whale.
Yeah.
And you're going to go in, really? What, that's the most important thing you can think of doing?
What I thought was really strange at the last election is that the Green Party, in principle, if this was a party that was just all about saving the environment, I'm horrified by the plastics in the ocean and I'm concerned about climate change, the impact it's having already. But, if that was their platform, I think, do you know what? I might give them a vote because I've had it with the Tories, I've had it with Labour,
Yeah.
I've totally forgotten about the Lib Dems. I could be a candidate as a Green Party voter, but I looked at their manifesto and they had a policy on tuition fees.
Yeah.
Now, why does the Green
I know.
Party have a view
Well, do you
on
know, in Scotland-
university tuition
In
fees?
Scotland, right, the Green Party are for independence.
How does
Which
that
people
work?
go, well, hang on a minute. What if I want to vote for the Green Party? Why does I have to be in an independent Scotland?
Yeah, it's
Planks.
overreach. I mean, ultimately, the Green Party's manifesto it made Corbyn's manifesto look inexpensive and right wing.
Exactly.
And it was
Well, it's the
extraordinary.
politics of envy. That's what they're about now, isn't it? It's how very dare you have a job,
Oh,
earn
yeah.
money.
It's
you
all
know,
Dame
feed
Emma
your own
Thompson's
kids.
big-
Yeah.
It's
stuff,
funny,
isn't it?
in countries like Germany,
It's all right
the
for me
Green
to fly around, but you can't.
Yeah.
It's the Green Party in Germany are much more successful because they're borderline centre ground,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they've got a big, strong opinion on sort of pollution and
Nuclear energy and all that.
CO2. Yeah, but ultimately, apart from that, they're quite sensible.
Yeah.
And that's why people vote for them.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Sensible politics. Who knows?
It won't catch on.
Let's
It
hear
definitely
your
won't
second
catch
one,
on.
Dawn.
Right, okay, well, it's still politics.
Is it?
It's so difficult
Well,
to
it's
find
difficult.
flanks
How
in the
can it
world of
not be?
politics,
It's difficult
isn't
to
it?
get away.
This, though, is the Labour Party.
Ah.
And Keir Starmer.
Scoundrels.
Yeah, and this is the fact that Labour Party want to introduce emergency laws to stamp out, love that term
Oh,
of phrase,
yes.
very reassuring,
Yeah.
anti-vaccine
Yes.
content
Yeah.
online.
This is a good one, actually,
The thought
isn't it?
police,
Yeah.
basically.
I
They'll
know.
become, look, I'll be first in line for this vaccine. I don't have a problem with that, and anti-vaxxers are, on the whole, lunatics.
Yeah.
However, when you start criminalising people for having an opinion and closing down the debate, which is dangerous because it drives debate underground, as we all know that. But it's like, you are entitled to have an opinion. You are entitled to voice, whether it's online or in reality, that you are a bit concerned about how fast the coronavirus vaccine has been developed. That's not being anti-vax.
No,
that
it's
is
not.
Just having an opinion, expressing it. Because let's face it.
But isn't it funny, Dawn, how everything now has become this polarised, you know? So therefore, if you vote for Brexit, you must be a racist.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got concerns about a vaccine, you must be an anti-vaxxer.
Yeah, and if you're anti-lockdown, you're right-wing.
Yeah.
What's that all
exactly.
about?
Why is that? No,
It's
absolutely.
not political and it shouldn't be.
No. But I mean, while I know thalidomide isn't a vaccine, okay, everyone, before you start texting and messaging me, back in the 60s, you know, Dr. Francis Kelsey raised concerns about thalidomide. And under Labour's rulings, she would have been criminalised and probably thrown in jail for daring to voice doubts about that drug. Now, we all know what happened with thalidomide, absolutely horrific.
Yeah.
And so why are we trying to shut down debate? Because we are shutting down the scientists who know what they're talking about, not just the anti-vax lobby.
Yeah.
And it's just a dangerous road to go down.
Well, it is, because also it doesn't ever stop. I mean, as we've seen with the whole lockdown policy, you know, they're already now saying, oh, it might not be working, so we might have to do it some more. You know, a bit more, bit longer, a bit harder.
Yeah, but we're calling it tier 4.
Yeah.
Rather than lockdown.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah, of course. And as long as you call it something different,
Yeah.
that's fine. You know, like a fire break, as they say in Wales. Fire break. That's what they had.
That's
they didn't
Pakistan,
have,
isn't
They
it?
didn't have a circuit breaker.
They had a fire break.
No, that's Welsh. Listen, I used to work in Cardiff. I did a very good Welsh accent.
You didn't spend enough time there, did you?
I did, actually, but I only spoke to English people. No, that's not true.
What happened is they had a fire break. We in England, we had a fire sale of the entire British economy.
That's right.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
It's still going on.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, you know, it would start with that, and then suddenly there would be something else that you wouldn't be allowed to say.
I just find that appalling.
It's very, very
I think
creepy.
we are criminalising ordinary, everyday behaviour. We're criminalising people having
Right.
opinions.
I thought Keir Starmer was a human rights lawyer.
Wow.
Wasn't he?
Yeah.
But he wants to shut you down if he doesn't like what you say.
If you don't like, yeah.
Doesn't sound very human
You can
rightsy,
have an
does it?
opinion as long as I agree with it.
Yeah.
Well, indeed, and we know that there are some very worrying aspects of legislation in Scotland around freedom of speech.
Oh,
yeah, the hate
Of course,
crimes,
hate
yeah.
crimes, you
Yeah.
know, which is a deep
You
concern.
shot your dad for having a bit of an opinion that's not
So
very
you
fashionable.
can go to dinner with your family, you know, back in the day when you could do that sort of thing.
What?
And have a conversation and be nicked for it.
Yeah,
Yes.
Uncle Bertie's had a couple of sherries too many, and he said the wrong word. Right, that's it. Throw the police.
Now,
you know,
yeah,
can you imagine?
Like Dawn, I'm pro-vaccine because I have 2 children and I am just so grateful that there's a vaccine for MMR, all of which are serious diseases, and people's sort of wacky theories about autism and all the rest of it, completely unsubstantiated, means that some people are not taking or giving their kids this vaccine, which is proven over many decades to be effective. And some of these awful diseases, like mumps,
but you're not
measles, and rubella,
you're not
coming
going to
back.
make people any more convinced about it if they've got doubts by banning ever considering
Well, that's
talking
exactly
about
right.
it.
And then, of course, it's
Right?
great news for the conspiracy theorists who can then just
They'll
assume
just say,
that
yeah.
there
Banned
is
it so there's
there is
something
an
worth
agenda.
I mean, we
it
get
for.
people whenever, you know, we've had a few problems with the YouTube feed this week, you know, whenever it goes off, there's people going, they've been silenced. They've
Yeah.
been censored.
Yeah.
That's it. You know, you go, no, actually, it's just a problem with one of the cameras. No, we know what's happened. You've been censored.
I must confess, I did that last night with BBC One. Panorama was
Yeah,
about
what happened?
to
'Cause I
start,
saw that there was
and
some
BBC
problem.
One went down completely.
Did it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Really?
Just, they had a technical issue. Now, I think, given the issues with Panorama recently, from 25 years ago, I think it was the ghost of Diana. Just putting that out there.
I like
Just
it.
putting that out there.
Interesting. Yeah, in the days when Panorama was an honourable programme. Oh no, sorry, it wasn't. It was run by Martin Bashir, that guy who acted like the
used
worst
and
kind
abused a
of
very
News of the
vulnerable-
World reporter in the history of journalism.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Used and abused a very vulnerable young woman.
It's also extraordinary that
Way to go.
Keir Starmer is worried.
He was in Plank of the Week last week, by the way, Bashir. So we can't put him
course
in
he
this
was.
week.
No, I know. That's just.
It's extraordinary that Keir Starmer is worried about potential propaganda influencing a debate, given the fact that the Tories and Labour have joined forces to create a complete culture of fear in this country, that people are afraid to step out of their houses because they're going to instantly die from coronavirus. And therefore, it's like, well, it's not even an equal contest. The craziest of the anti-vaxxers have no chance of pricking the bubble that is the bubble of fear that we're all currently living in. In the end, you've got to have free speech. And what you do is...
There will always be
on talk
consequences, and that's fine.
What we can do is have anti-vaxxers on our shows and we can challenge them and we can make them look
that
foolish.
would make more
what
sense.
we don't do is shut them down.
This is the way to do it, to have that debate out there and open up the debate. So you have sensible, sane people, possibly not like you used to, but then saying, no, this is the actual scientific fact. Let's hear what you've got to say about that.
Right.
That is the way to go forward. Then it gets rid of the conspiracy theory.
But I think the trouble is, there was always conspiracy theory. There will always be conspiracy theory. I think it seems like a bigger thing now because of social media. I'm not even sure it is a bigger thing. But I think there are just an awful lot of people making an awful lot of noise about it.
Yeah, but this is the other thing with this ruling that Labour want to bring in. They're talking about the social media platforms. So is Twitter going to judge whether my opinion is worthwhile or not?
Exactly.
Twitter?
Well, they do, don't they? I mean, they've already been under fire for blocking some of the political stuff in America.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, like when Donald Trump puts a tweet out saying he's won, they put a little rejoinder out which says, you know, this information has been challenged by the electoral authorities or something like that, you know? So they're already doing that. You know, they already decide what you can say and what you can't say.
It's the thin end of the wedge, because I think we can all agree that we're not on the side of anti-vaxxers. But at what point do you go from anti-vaxxers to lockdown skeptics? And at what point is anybody that questions the cosy COVID consensus a dangerous nutter?
Well,
and I mean, that's
say,
a direct
example,
quote, by the way, from a Labour MP on Dan Wootton's show, who called Dan Wootton dangerous for challenging these measures. And a nutter.
Well, I mean, the bit less said about that particular Labour MP, the better, I think. But, you know, he blocked me very shortly thereafter, funnily enough, and I think he blocked everyone from Talk Radio.
He hasn't blocked me.
A bit like Emma Kennedy.
Because I said he had nice pants.
Oh, did you?
Remember, he infamously posed in his pants.
Well, that was why he blocked me, because I retweeted that original picture and said, you know, this is the guy who posed in his pants. And the most disturbing thing about the posing in the pants picture is what's on the shelf behind him.
Yeah, I know. No, don't describe it again.
No.
By the way, if Keir Starmer wants to really identify the enemy when it comes to sort of dangerous propaganda, he should look at the platforms that carry all of this nonsense and amplify it. And that would be Facebook and Twitter and these other sites. Because ultimately there are algorithms built within the Facebook platform that actually send these mad theories to people that might potentially agree with them, and they share them with their friends, and you have an echo chamber. So it's Mark Zuckerberg that's the enemy if you want to find him.
That's where they want to ban it all from. But let's have your second one.
I'm going to offer you Ryan John Butcher. Are you familiar with his work?
I'm not.
I'm sure he's a really decent guy. He's a journalist, and he's an editor at Pink News, which is an excellent news platform.
Is it?
Yeah, it's
not something I see on a regular basis.
I can't say I subscribe, but it's a decent.
Not that there's anything wrong with subscribing.
It's a decent paper.
It's very good. Yeah.
However, Ryan John Butcher came unstuck this week because he went after David Baddiel.
Oh, yeah.
Who I think we can all agree is a pretty talented guy, successful children's
author.
Well,
I don't actually think he is, but that's another story.
Right, okay.
He liked my joke, he can do no wrong.
He liked your jokes, and now you love him, right?
He's a stand-up comedian.
I'm so shallow you wouldn't believe it.
I think perhaps what we can agree is that he's certainly had a kind of enduring career within the world of comedy. Love him or hate him.
He certainly has. You can't deny his career, that's for sure.
Not a flash in the pan. So he tweeted something political, and it was a joke. It was clearly a joke, which I thought was quite a good gag, actually. So I'll just quote it to you. I'll just change one of the words. It's a family show.
Yes.
But David Baddiel tweeted the following. Why exactly is Carrie Symonds opposed to the appointment of Lee Cain? I can only assume it's because Boris is having sex with him. Okay.
Right.
Now that is clearly a joke about Boris Johnson being a little sexually
It's not very funny,
incontinent.
by the way. I mean, this is my point about Baddiel. It's not hilarious, is it? Really?
No,
it's not
but
that funny.
It's obviously the shorthand is that Boris has a bit of a checkered love life.
Yeah.
He's got a famed libido, and it focuses on that.
Yes.
An editor at Pink News has responded on Twitter. Good. We're at the must be having gay sex stage of Johnson's government. It's the year 2020, and I'm once again reminding comedians that belittling leaders by implying they're gay is simply homophobic.
No, for heaven's sake.
Now, the reason why this
bothers
bothers
me,
life,
mate.
It's one thing.
Sense of humour.
Really?
It's one thing to not have a sense of humour, and that is a problem now with wokeism.
Yes.
Is that
this is almost deliberately not having a sense of humour, isn't it?
Well, this is actually not understanding the joke.
Right.
So we've
Do
gone beyond.
you not think it's willful though? It's almost like he doesn't want to understand.
But you're looking for offence. You're looking for offence everywhere these days.
Yeah, but I think exactly, and I think such is the level of tunnel vision that this person, who I'm sure is a decent guy, let's not make it a character assassination. I see Ryan as a symptom of
You're
a
only
kind of
calling him a plank. It's not that bad.
Well, no, but I mean, I see it as a symptom of people out there waiting to be offended, but also now actually sort of ignoring the truth or not even seeing the truth of a joke because of an agenda. And I find that very troubling because that's nearly like propaganda.
Well, that's another one for the Labour Party where, there are things you're not supposed to say, and obviously if you say it, therefore you must be a horrible person because of what you've said, which you have willfully misunderstood.
Yeah. Unless it's anti-Semitism, well, that's completely fine.
That's
we'll
all right.
go with that.
There's nothing going on there.
Yeah.
I still find that a bit puzzling, that whole investigation by Shami Chakrabarti.
She's gone very quiet.
She's gone really quiet.
How's that going, that investigation?
Yeah. Well, apparently she didn't find anything, so, nothing there.
Nothing to see here.
Pre-lockdown, back in the day, I used to be a comedian, right? Do you remember when you'd have like a comedy club with people packed together, drinking beers and
I
laughing?
just don't remember him being funny, do you?
No, I'm
like David Baddiel. I've been getting away with it for years. But, I'm deeply concerned, actually. Sense of humour is an acid test of a decent society.
It is.
Absolutely.
And actually, it's the acid test of a public figure, of a politician, or anybody in a leadership role, such as the editor of an online newspaper. If we can't laugh at ourselves, then that is actually a big problem for society. You know, because when you laugh at yourself, it means that you're willing to back down from an argument and that you have self-awareness.
Yes,
and
also you realise actually that it's all rather ridiculous.
It's a bit silly.
The idea that anybody takes me seriously, for example, I find ridiculous. They don't get it when I'm sort of occasionally making fun of myself on social media, on Twitter. They think I'm actually being real. Because, you have to have a certain level of subtlety to get it. And most people don't get it. And they just think, you pompous git, which is hilarious.
Well, I edited a tabloid for 15 years. If you can't laugh at yourself doing that, you seriously are in trouble.
Everyone's got to laugh at themselves. And my Twitter bio says Rear of the Year 2007.
Yes.
Which
I thought that was true.
Shock horror. Well, I was definitely...
He has got a nice bum.
My rear was better 13 years ago. But it wasn't quite Carol Vorderman.
No.
Somebody chose to abuse me online, and one of their lines of attack was, and he's still boasting about Rear of the Year.
Yeah.
No, serious?
Yeah, so that's where we are.
Oh, my Lord.
I know, there is some bad stuff going on out there. Speaking of people with no sense of humour, I'm going to go for Matt Hancock as my second nomination. This is a guy who, when he was asked about the original Game Changer, which was, of course, the NHS app that we were going to get, when he said that he was also going to not only have the government's version, but he was also going to co-opt the Apple version as well. He actually said, I'm from Newmarket, so I know a thing or two about backing both horses. And you go, well, first of all, if you're going to horse racing, you don't back both horses, you back one horse, usually, because only one of them actually can win. If you want to back 7 horses at the Grand National, that's fine. If you're going to make an analogy about horses because you're from Newmarket, you should really get it right, shouldn't you?
Yes, and also...
if there was a 2-horse race, you wouldn't back both of them.
You can back as many horses as you want if it's your money, but it turns out it's our cash.
Yeah, well, this is the issue.
And also, all the horses are actually lame, it turns out, and they're not running anyway, because that's what's happened.
Yeah.
We now have a Prime Minister who's holed up in Downing Street because he was pinged. Even though he doesn't have anything wrong with him, even though he's already had the disease, even though there's no threat to anybody else if he goes out, he's going to stay in for 14 days. But Hancock gets it this week, not just for generally being a bit of a pompous buffoon. He also gets it for saying on Julie Hartley-Brewer's show, effectively, that Carl Hennigan, who's a very well-respected and incredibly well-read and well-researched medical professor, was basically lying about the data.
Yeah.
He was asked if, in fact, he would take on board some of Carl Hennigan's recommendations. He more or less said, well, we prefer to follow our own data, as if, he's following somebody else's data.
The data that's hideously out of date.
He effectively gaslit Carl Hennigan by describing him as an outlier.
Yeah.
I mean, it was offensive.
Which is a bit like calling him a nutter.
Yeah.
It's a slightly more generous version of nutter. He also refused to rule out the idea that if you don't want to have a vaccination, which you both said you would anyway, he would not rule out forced vaccinations. Compulsory vaccinations. Hello?
1930s.
I mean, really? Really? I mean, I've had this conversation with a couple of people, and as much as I understand that it's a movable feast and you can't make predictions about what the future is going to hold, there are certain things I think as a cabinet minister you should be ruling out, like compulsory vaccinations, or shooting people with a firing squad if they refuse to be vaccinated. You'd rule that out, wouldn't you?
I feel like I'm living in East Germany.
Yeah.
I really feel like.
I think a couple of themes have been running throughout this show. One is about sort of personal freedom and liberty, and another is about our inability to have a grown-up conversation conversation about anything. And I think we should have a conversation about COVID measures and about vaccines. And ultimately, the Prime Minister rightly said that he is, what did he say, bursting with antibodies?
Yeah.
Okay. Apparently
I didn't like the image that created.
No,
I must
no,
admit.
I don't want to think of Boris
he's
bursting.
I don't want to
anywhere.
be bursting.
He's bursting with a lot of stuff, which is TMI.
Yeah, it really is.
But ultimately, you know, he admitted the cat's out the bag, that once you've had COVID, you're not going to get it again. There are 5 reported cases globally. Now, I'd love to have a look at those 5 cases. Right. You know, statistically, based on margin of error, you can't get COVID twice.
Pretty much.
And therefore, there's a surprise. Maybe all the healthy people in our society should be able to get it, just like you get the flu every year.
Well, maybe loads
and
of
then
people
you're
have.
then you're not COVID positive anymore.
Well, as somebody pointed out, technically speaking, if he's bursting with antibodies, that's what he would
Can
be.
we just stop with that phrase?
Sorry. All right. Shall we say
Is he heaving?
overflowing?
Oh, no.
You know.
Is he about to pop?
Seeping?
Stop it.
What about seeping?
Leaking.
Leaking.
Okay,
no.
boys.
No, I think you stick with bursting, to be honest.
Okay, yeah, fair
All
enough.
right, bursting with antibodies, right? Isn't that the same as having been vaccinated? Because that's what a vaccine gives you.
Yeah.
So effectively, he's also vaccinated against COVID.
Yeah.
And yet he's still not going out.
Well, it's a free
Which
vaccine.
means vaccines don't work.
People getting COVID is a free vaccine. Now, don't get me wrong. If you're 85 and have asthma, you do not want to get COVID.
No.
And if I'm in that situation, then I'm first in queue for that vaccine. But I wonder whether in time it will be up to people to decide whether they trust their immune system and other health factors in relation to whether they have the jab or not.
But you know what's going to happen, don't you? It won't be compulsory. It will be backdoor compulsory.
Yeah, I mean,
you
he's
won't be
made
able to
that
travel.
point.
You won't be able to go to football. You
Right.
won't be able to go to theatre unless you've got a certificate or a microchip.
Yeah.
Conspiracy theory. Saying that you've had the vaccination.
Right. And I don't really mind that. That's not the same as compulsory vaccination because it's very, very different in some ways. You know, if you go to certain countries, you need to get vaccinated to go there.
Yeah, sure.
You know, I had to get cholera when I went to India. I think I had yellow fever as well. I mean, it was awful. And if you go to certain parts of Africa, you have to take, malaria pills.
Oh, yeah, horrible
and all that
things.
kind of thing, right? So I don't really mind that because if you don't want it and you feel so strongly that you don't want that, then you just don't go.
Yeah.
So
But that's travelling. It's not going about your everyday life. Will it get to the point where supermarkets won't let you access to that store unless you can flash an identity card saying you've been vaccinated?
By the way, here's another thought, folks. I believe that the scientists, the sage scientists, have lost the dressing room in relation to the British public and our belief in them.
Yeah.
And the problem you've got is I don't think we'd have been having this vaccine chat 6 months ago, because when COVID-19 started and if the medical advisor said, look, there's a vaccine coming, everyone would be like, happy days.
Yeah.
But now we don't trust mainstream
don't.
scientists.
No,
So in other
absolutely not.
words, would you take Chris Whitty's word for it
No.
that this jab is safe?
No, I wouldn't.
Look,
That's the trouble.
If he told me it was raining, I'd have to go and check.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean,
Get your
and
brolly.
they've done this to themselves because they have emerged as these ridiculously overcautious individuals who, if they could, would prevent everybody from doing anything which was in any way risky. They're like those kind of insurance salesmen, aren't they? Where they go, well, you can't put a window there because it's too high up, and I'm afraid we can't insure you for
And
that.
I think because they're all so frightened, protect their own backsides of legal action coming further down the line.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And I hope somebody does it. I really hope somebody with more money than I've got actually sues them for this.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think there will be some businesses when they do finally go
absolutely.
under.
I really hope so. But
Will
not
go,
only that,
do you know
Mike,
what? You forced us into bankruptcy.
Yeah, for the abuse of our children,
Yeah.
for the abuse of our old people, the lives they have cost by being so useless.
Well, I don't want to sound grand or it sound like I'm exaggerating, but I think there's a chance an entire political generation will be wiped out. I think Boris, I agree with you. I think he's toast already. I think Rishi Sunak has saved his own bacon by being a kind of privately locked down skeptic voice within the cabinet.
absolutely.
He's made it clear to anyone that will listen that he's been pushing back on all of the COVID measures since day one, and therefore positioning himself to be on the right side of the argument when all of this is done.
Maybe. Let's have your final nominee. Number 3, isn't it?
Yes, and it's me, isn't it?
Is it?
I
thought it
can't
was Dawn.
remember.
I thought it was me. Yeah, it is me. Yeah, why am I looking at him?
I don't know.
I
I
don't
was
know
looking at you.
because he talks a lot, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. Yeah,
he does.
too
Also,
much.
he's got that magnetic personality. You're immediately drawn. Or
In my
maybe you're just
dreams.
repelled by
Is he
me, and so you look the other way.
bursting with magnetic
He is.
personality?
Yeah, he is actually. Yeah.
Okay, put my glass on to make me look more intelligent.
Go on.
Because my
Too late.
final... Wait, you can't say
Sorry.
that. Sexist. Any case, my final nomination are going to be the Metropolitan Police.
Oh, yes.
However, it does apply to other police forces around the country as well.
Yes.
The Manchester City Police Force as well. Who
The Dorset ones have
the Dorset ones are in
trouble.
trouble. Sorry to people in Dorset, that was really bad.
Yeah.
But the Metropolitan Police, obviously I live in London. What really upset me at the weekend was they put a tweet out encouraging people to grass anti-coronas rule breakers up. Now, I live in Tower Hamlets, one of the poorest boroughs in London. We have kids selling drugs on the street corner. We have them stabbing one another.
Those bike kids
Absolutely.
up on the back wheel.
And no one says a word, not enough police. You get in any sort of trouble, you have your house burgled, you get a crime reference number.
Yeah. They don't even come around.
But they've got the time to tweet this out, grass your neighbour up and we'll be around like a shot.
Yeah.
Probably mob-handed.
Absolutely
I
amazing.
was really, really angry.
You will find no more fervent, passionate supporter of the British police
Absolutely.
than me. And I actually supported the applause for NHS workers on a Thursday night. But then I thought it was a double-edged sword, because what about the other public sector workers? What about the military? What about the prison officers? And what about the cops? The cops have drawn the short straw during this pandemic, because they have had to enforce unenforceable, ludicrous rules which are confusing. Even they have constantly got to double check
absolutely.
Well,
what
the
the
case in
rules
Dorset,
are.
funnily enough, the case in Dorset was of a guy who has now been compensated and has had his name sort of exonerated because he was arrested by the police because he went to a supermarket, I think it was an Aldi's, wasn't wearing a mask, was confronted by the staff. He said he was exempt. He didn't have any paperwork.
And they asked him what his exemption was?
And I think he had asthma. And the police were called. The police arrived and basically handcuffed him and sort of dragged him out of the shop.
Middle-aged couple shopping, weren't they, together?
Yeah, and the wife turned up showed his the thing that they use to
Puffer.
breathe, the puffer thing.
Inhaler.
Because it didn't have his name on it, they didn't believe it was his. And
first
so,
of all,
you just think, I totally get that the police have got a difficult job and it's hard enough for them to do what they do, and we've already talked about Extinction Rebellion, but they surely must, in those situations, be able to make a judgment. You don't need to handcuff the guy.
You
You don't
need
need to shove him into a car and arrest him and take him to the station and charge him. You just say, look, this is causing a bit of a scene.
Yeah.
It would be really helpful if you just let your wife do the shopping.
Yeah.
Would you mind waiting in the car park?
It's
Something like that.
It's just common sense.
I don't know about that. I think that the government's measures are such an example of overreach. For me, overreach is a catchword of this whole pandemic. It's over. We've done too much to destroy the economy to control this COVID death toll. It's awful death toll, of course, but forgetting about the resultant damage from these measures. And I think that the police are just doing their job, and it looks absurd at times, especially the numbers. So in Essex, at the beginning of the second lockdown, I counted on a video 12 officers trying to unilaterally close down a gym.
Yeah.
And it's like, why do they need so many cop cars,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
much personnel?
Well, as Peter Hitchens said, we're always being told there's a shortage of police
Oh, I
officers.
know.
Yeah.
But there's no shortage of them
for
in these
proper crime, there
situations.
is.
And so
For
I
that.
think, whilst I put that caveat in, I couldn't be a greater supporter of the police, and they do a difficult job. They are being made a mockery, and they are now losing public confidence as a result of the laws they're enforcing. And so in the end, it's going to be a big headache for Cressida Dick and all of the police forces post-pandemic, when I think our regard for cops will have dropped.
Because we have a respect for the police in this country. I still think most law-abiding people do. And that, like our respect for scientists and SAGE, is being eroded.
Yeah.
You now don't trust them. You don't believe a word they say. They're heavy-handed.
Well, because this
just
country
like-
is based on people behaving in a reasonable way.
Yes.
And if people start behaving in an unreasonable way, then that's a problem.
Well, it's policing by consent, and now we're being policed by force for not even breaking criminal laws.
And the authority of the police is being undermined, which is fatal, and it will take some winning back after the pandemic. And I interviewed just a couple of weeks ago a retired detective in Seattle, and both of his sons went into the police force because they loved what their dad did and they wanted. And he said that their job is so much harder than his was 20, 30 years ago because of all of the anti-police sentiment. And it's making their job almost impossible. And we're risking doing that to our own police here.
Well, we saw
with
what
the
happened in
COVID
the
rules.
summer. It doesn't take much, another long, hot summer, police being lured into areas of Britain, which were basically run by gangs, and then being set upon. Being that's what they do in America all the time. They make them come into these.
They were going into these areas armed with nothing but a high-vis vest.
I know.
And then running away.
I know. It's absolutely shocking. But that's a good one. So, your third.
I'm going to offer you Phillip Schofield.
Yes.
And the reason why is because what happened on this morning on ITV was another of these gotcha moments that the mainstream media is so keen on. This is the kind of low-hanging fruit moment in an interview where you try to catch a politician out or some other commentator with a really spurious question that's not massively relevant to the wider debate. You know, it's a gotcha. And on this occasion, Andrew Neil, who I think essentially enjoys across the political spectrum, he enjoys the respect of everybody. You know, whether you're to the left or to the right, we all know that this guy eviscerates all of his interviewees. Why the BBC got rid of him, I will never know. But he was feared.
Well, I think we all know the answer to that.
We probably do. The wrong politics.
Well, he never recovered from his Carol Cadwallader tweet, did he?
Maybe not.
Maybe not. When he called her the crazy Catwoman.
Yeah, and that's that's inappropriate. But ultimately, I mean, it was very telling when Boris Johnson was happy to be interviewed by everybody during the last election campaign, except Andrew Neil. That doesn't tell you that he's a masterly broadcaster, then nothing will. And he appeared on This Morning, and he was interviewed by Phillip Schofield and Holly Willoughby, and he was criticising the Extinction Rebellion stunt, the offensive stunt.
As we have done.
And Phillip Schofield said, "Are you a climate change denier?" And it was just a low point for political interviewing. I mean, I don't know why.
Well, I wouldn't call that a political interview, really.
Well, no, I don't know
the
why.
The idea that Andrew Neil, one of the greatest interviewers in the world that ever has been, is being interviewed by Phillip Schofield. I mean, who would have written that script?
Well, I think This Morning is a good show and I enjoy watching it, but they should stick to makeovers and recipes, because ultimately this was a case of Phillip Schofield wading into uncharted waters out of his depth outrageously. And
he's just denying stuff. He's denied his sexuality for years.
Well, you know, I applaud him for coming out, definitely. And I think that when you've had a career and a long marriage and then you have to sort of grapple with that kind of thing, that's not easy.
But he should stay away from interviewing people like Andrew Neil.
But please don't,
whatever his training has been.
Know your place in the kind of hierarchy of TV interviewers. And it was just, it was an embarrassing moment, and I thought it was also a reflection on how so much of what happens in political interviews now is about sort of the cheap, shallow gotcha moment, and it's not great for discourse or learning anything from the person you're interviewing.
No.
Talking about distrust again, like we have with the police and with the scientists in SAGE, people are now distrusting the mainstream media. They're distrusting
they are.
Sources
and
they
should
be trusted. Yeah, but there is a good reason. But what are you listening to instead? Are you listening to social media?
Radio. That's why everybody's coming here.
Well, of course I do. No,
that's
absolutely.
why everybody's coming here. I mean, it's no accident. I'm not just blowing our trumpet here, but people are listening to Talk Radio because they see it as something very different. And it shouldn't be very different. I mean, we're not actually doing anything which is incredibly unusual. What we're actually doing is allowing people to have opinions, not abusing them for having opinions that we don't like, and actually letting them say what they want to say.
Well, I must say that Talk Radio has gained an extraordinary amount of traction online and through social media by not being right-wing, left-wing, lockdown skeptic, pro-lockdown, but just being a place where all opinions are welcome and aired. And some of the sort of lockdown skeptic voices on your show, of course, fantastic.
What's it called again?
But we know the Independent Republic, but Peter Hitchens on your show, you know, and I've sort of spoken to
He's an amazing character, you know, and he's a very cautious and very concerned individual. He's not some, rabid right-wing maniac, which is what some people review Talk Radio as, because that's what they think it is. But actually, that's not what it is at all.
Well, no, so Talk Radio hasn't done anything particularly special. It's just been a place where all opinions are welcome.
Humble.
I know, but what it hasn't done is sort of just tagged along with the kind of government agenda of making everyone afraid.
As what Dawn was saying about people's lack of trust in other media, it's because they don't really believe that they're being fair, because the other media that people see is very biased. It's very slanted. I mean, we saw the BBC the other week doing that report from Liverpool. Now, the news that day had been that the infection rate in Liverpool was going down. They did a huge, really scurrilous and kind of fear-mongering report about how they were about to run out of beds. Absolute nonsense.
It's nonsense.
By the way, the really important thing is, if you're an interviewer, why don't you just probe your guest, and why don't you ask sensible questions, which is what happened on Julia Hartley-Brewer's breakfast show this week, which I think produced one of the really big moments of politics in the week. Julia is the interviewer who got Matt Hancock to admit that potentially this vaccine could be mandatory.
Yeah.
You know, and she didn't shout at him.
No.
There were no gotcha moments.
No.
She just probed him, and she asked the same question several times. And at no point did he say it will never be mandatory.
Well, the whole
and that
point
was a
of
story.
interviewing, the whole point of interviewing people is to get them to say what you want them to say, without trying to make them say something they don't want to say.
And it's about listening to their answers and not shouting them down.
Yeah, exactly. Now, we're running very late here, guys. I mean, it's been very enjoyable. But, you know, I'm going to have to rush through my final one, which is Peter Morgan. Now, I don't know an awful lot about Peter Morgan, except that he has written some of the most successful television and movies in the world that have ever been. Frost Nixon is one of his, apparently, but he's also the writer of The Crown. But I'm going to take issue with him. I don't know much about The Crown because I only started watching it this week for the first time. Right? There's 4 series. I've always kind of studiously ignored it just because it's not really for me. I used to work in Fleet Street like Dawn. I spent more time following members of the royal family than I care to mention. I've been at, you know, cocktail parties with Prince Edward, for God's sake, in Nova Scotia. I mean, that's how bad it got, you know, because that was when in the days when they couldn't even be bothered sending anyone from London. It was very funny, actually, because I was in this cocktail sort of line of receptions, you know, and he was meeting the various members of the press, and there was somebody from the Halifax Bugle, somebody from, you know, the Toronto Star, and he got to me. And he said, and who are you? I said, I'm Mike Graham from the News of the World. You've never seen him run further across the other side of the room. He thought it was all the local press. But anyway, but the Crown, which is, to all intents and purposes, a docudrama about something that actually happened, right? It's a story of a royal family and all of the various things that happen to the royal family, but it's partly history in the making, you know? Now, I don't have a problem with a little bit of dramatic license at all.
Yes.
However, this guy, Peter Morgan, has admitted in a series of interviews for this most recent series, which is all about Charles and Diana, which is relatively recent. Don't forget, of course, that Harry and William, the sons of Diana, are still supposedly scarred by her death. Harry doesn't seem to mind that, you know, Netflix are paying him bucket loads of money to do a series on him, while they traduce his mother and father and make out that they were a pair of absolute maniacs and adulterers and, you know, nutters, effectively. He's admitted that he basically made loads of stuff up. Lots of things that didn't happen appear in The Crown as if they did happen. Now, that gives an impression to an awful lot of very gullible people, many of them watching from other countries of the world, that these are actually true events that happen. And I think, and as much as, yes, it's only supposed to be television and it's only supposed to be entertainment, I think that's quite dangerous. And I think he should be much more responsible about what he portrays, because it's not as if their relationship wasn't crazy enough. I mean, why would you have to make stuff up?
True.
You know what I mean?
But it is a drama, Mike.
I know you say that.
It is a drama, but the problem I have with you is that people are seeing it as fact.
Yeah.
Even sensible grown-up people.
I mean, like the
are seeing
scene
it as fact.
where he first meets Diana and she's dressed as a nymph or something, hiding behind a pillar. Apparently, that never happened. He's just made that up. That's quite an important part of the show, isn't it?
Well, the people that hate the royals want to believe it's real. It's an agenda, isn't it? But Peter Morgan is a British sort of screenwriter and playwright, and he's an example of a self-loathing Brit. The way that he's willing to rewrite history and
do you think he might be a Remainer?
Well, he's definitely not. He's definitely not pro-monarchy. In the end, though, I think there's a halfway house. So you have dramatic license, but you also have a duty of care to history and to some truth.
I think so.
Yeah.
Particularly if the individuals that you're writing about are still alive.
Well, exactly.
And many of them are.
And of course, don't forget, by the way, if it wasn't royals that were being written about, but celebrities, they would all be suing as we speak.
Well, the Queen never complains, never explains.
Yeah.
Which is not a bad
But
thing.
in a way,
mind you, Harry and Meghan do quite a lot of suing, but not in this case, obviously, because there's too much money involved.
But that's because they're not proper royals, you know. But the real proper royals, like the Queen and Prince Charles, they would never litigate because they're above that, which is why they're fit for being heads of state, you know. And that's why I'm afraid Harry and Meghan weren't. And I'd say it's no great loss to the royal family, those two. But in the end, it's actually pretty offensive, some of the footage in this series. Not only are a lot of the royals a soft target because they won't sue, there are people featured in this story who aren't even alive anymore. Princess Diana tragically lost her life in Paris all those years ago, the late 90s. Was it 98?
97.
97. And she's not here to defend her own legacy,
but her two sons
reputation.
are still here, and they have made it very clear that they were both pretty damaged by what happened, as you would not be surprised to know. So I think it's pretty awful for this guy to just run roughshod over that and just think it's okay to make things up. Why would you do that?
I must admit, I do watch it, and like you, it's the first episode of The Crown I've watched because we worked on it, we covered it, I lived through this. I interviewed Diana. The rest of it previously was costume drama, but this is real, and I do wonder what the Queen's thinking, what Harry and William, I mean, say what you want about Harry, but this is his mum.
No, I know.
And his dad.
He really doesn't need to see her, throwing up in a toilet, does he?
Well, that bit makes me very uncomfortable as well, because while I appreciate, with bulimia, you need to get the horrors of that illness, there are also people going, it's not a bad idea, is it? Oh, and that's how you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a fine line to tread with that.
I just think it's tasteless at least.
Yeah.
And at worst, it's actually, I would say, criminal.
And in the end, these are human beings and it's people's lives.
Yeah, but it's also history, and it's our country's history, and this is being put out there as if it happened.
Well, that's right. Would the Americans be up in arms if there was a biopic about Abraham Lincoln that was as offensive?
Well, how about if it was about Michelle and Barack Obama?
Well, that would be definitely,
when their kids
that's
are
no go.
affected by whatever it is. I mean, but you wouldn't be writing about that and making stuff up, would he?
No, that's
and
no
I'm
go.
sure that
He said a
Barack
bad word
Obama
there.
was no angel in office either, because he's a human being and all human beings are flawed.
Well, exactly right. I'm so sorry you're such a pessimist about that. I, of course, do not have that view.
I'm
now,
not flawed.
We have been here for
Anyway.
quite a long time, so let's get on with the final tally.
Golly
We've got a 9
gosh.
now. We've got to go from 3 to 1.
Gosh.
So my 3, you can pick one. Matt Hancock, Extinction Rebellion, Peter Morgan. Who do you fancy?
Okay, brilliant. I think I'm going to take... I feel...
Is it just
that
him or both
He
of us?
picks.
Right,
Me.
he picks.
I
Right,
pick
okay.
you and you pick his.
I think that sort of, between Boris and Matt is a scoring draw. So I think I'm going to let you have Boris, and that's why for you, I'll take Peter Morgan for essentially profiting on the back of the memory of a dead woman.
Okay, I think that's a good choice. But I may not pick Boris, of course, because the delight of this game is that only I get to choose which one of her 3 goes forward.
It's like chess or poker.
It is.
Or
very
the
similar.
US elections.
Very
It's
similar.
inconclusive.
No, it's not. We get a result here on Plank of the Week. And
No,
it doesn't
I demand
take
a
3
recount.
months. So, Dawn, your 3?
My 3 were Boris Johnson, Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, and the Metropolitan Police, although other police forces are included in this.
It's got to be Boris, isn't it? I cannot shirk Boris this
That's
week.
a very wise,
I can't.
wise
particularly
decision.
just before this event took place, he tested negative, and he's still in there,
Yes.
right? So Boris for me. So now you get to
He's
pick
been
Mark.
testing negative since December 2019. So Boris it is. And I offered you a choice of Uncle Sam, this is a symbol of America, and the Pink News editor with no sense of humour.
Yeah.
And also, last but not least, I'm delighted to offer you Phillip Schofield.
Ah, yes.
Oh,
For his
this is
gotcha
tricky,
moment.
isn't it? I'm sorry. I'm going to go with Uncle Sam.
I think that's a
I'm
good
going to
choice.
go with America.
Okay.
I think that's a great
Yeah.
choice because it is. I mean, last week, understandable, because there's a bit of trauma after the first election day closes. But second week, we're not really anywhere nearer.
No,
I think so. Uncle Sam, Boris, and Mr. Morgan, not Piers, surprisingly. First time Morgan's been in it that's with not the first name of Piers. So this is a bit collegiate now. So it's up to you guys to.
We've got
pick.
another couple of hours to sit and
Yeah.
discuss it then, obviously, and
I mean,
have a
I would be-
recount. And
I think
would
this will be
find
the
it-
shortest bit of our chat.
I find it hard not to make Boris Plank of the Week,
gotta
to
be
be
Boris.
I
honest.
think Boris. I'm sorry, and I'd like to win, and it's Boris.
I know you like to win.
Yeah.
You do
I
like
don't
that,
like
you?
losing,
There's
so-
nothing more competitive than Dawn Neesom at Plank of the Week.
You know those murder trials when it takes the jury 11 minutes to
Yeah.
find that
Yeah, yeah.
person guilty? I
Boris.
think that's what we're looking at right
yeah,
now.
yeah,
Yeah,
Boris.
guilty as charged.
Yeah.
And I guess I would make maybe Uncle Sam number 2. Would you go with that? And Mr.
Yeah.
Peter
I think
Morgan.
so because I think that it matters to us in the UK that America does well and thrives, and at the moment the opposite's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
Okay, so Peter Morgan number 3. So I'm delighted to say, Prime Minister Boris Johnson, you are Plank of the Week. Well done. You can come out now.
Well deserved.
You can come out
Well
now
deserved,
to get your Plank Award.
Yeah.
Dawn Neesom, Mr. Mark Dolan, thank you very much indeed. We'll see you soon, I'm sure, on Talk Radio. We'll be back next week.